Let's start with the first story, which is that of the new EFCC chairman. The Senate has confirmed the appointment of Ola Olukoyede as the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. You know, he was nominated by the president last week. His name was sent to the Senate for proper confirmation, official confirmation, and that was done yesterday. We have a new sheriff in town now, a new handler when it comes to EFCC. And then a lot of people have been coming up with different reactions, mixed reactions anyway. Some are in support, some are not in support. Some are saying he doesn't have the 15 years experience when it comes to the EFCC Act, the provision by the EFCC Act. But importantly, Senate has confirmed him and he's the new EFCC chairman. Idauza, let me start with you. What's your take?
Well, congratulations to the EFCC chairman, and I was also very happy at the screening, the position he took on corruption issues in Nigeria. On Monday in Abuja, when the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Rep was being unveiled, having listened to people from the two arms of government, heard the Accountant General of the Federation speak, the Acting Auditor General speak, and then some lawmakers, and then the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and then the deputy chairman of the House of Rep. So I came to a conclusion, and I said to them in that committee, what I saw was a conflict between what the executive thinks and what the legislatures are thinking. And that has always been accounting for the tension in the system fighting corruption. And I said to them, the problem in Nigeria is not corruption. And everybody seems to be very surprised that corruption is not our problem. What's our problem? Our problem is weak institutions that has no power to act. Our problem is a system that we put in place that gives room for people to manipulate it. Now, when you remove this, you will see a lot of things work. So I told them that, look, in the front triangle, what people always say is the fact that you have a pressure. Now, when you have a pressure, then you see an opportunity. And then, of course, now on the other leg, the third leg, you have to weigh the consequence of your action. Now, if your rationalization of the consequence of what you're about to do, that the benefit far outweigh the cost, the chances are that you will want to take what does not belong to you or what belongs to the state. Now, so how do you do it? So I told them there, rather than fight alligators in the swamp, drain the water, then the alligator will find their way out. It's as simple. So our biggest problem has never been corruption. Our biggest problem is our failure to adopt systems that makes it impossible for human beings to exhibit their negative traits. The ball is on the court of the National Assembly today, and that's what the new chairman puts on there. So we spend more money fighting corruption. He made an example yesterday that if you steal 10 naira, for you to prosecute and recover that thing, you will likely spend 3.6 kobo to fight it. But if you have to prevent it, you are likely to spend 1 kobo to prevent it. So emphasis should be more on prevention than on fighting. Now, at the National Assembly, they are saying we are supposed to be checking what the executive is doing. Now, executive is thinking that every time the National Assembly is calling them for action, they are calling them thief. And that's not strange in our environment. Even in our homes, we find this. If you give your wife 20,000 to go to the market, and when he comes back and you are asking, how did you spend the money? The next thing that you will hear is that, do you think I stole the money? Because we are always afraid to give accounts. And I think this is where the problems are. So for us, as a country going forward, what we need to do is ensure that we reduce the interference of humans in the processes of selection. He talks about the contract scam in 3 years, over 2 trillion lost. Now, we can avoid all this by simply adopting e-procurement. So you don't know the bidder. Everybody apply online. They are pre-qualified online. So you don't need to settle anybody. If the fund is not there to fund the contract, the system will not work. So nobody will be awarding contract that is not backed up by fund. Nobody will be seeking you and saying, come and give me kickback. So you process your payments online. If you are qualified, nobody will say you are scheduled today and say, give me 20 naira so that I can move your schedule up. Now, once we adopt all these malfeasance we see in the system will naturally disappear. Because most of the corruption cases we see in public service is happening at the procurement level. And this is because we are still manual in the way we are doing something. Somebody need to carry your file. And for that person to carry your file, you will need to grease somebody's palm. And once we can remove all these things, I think a whole lot of things can really work for us. So we wish him well on this new endeavor, and we pray that himself will not, at the end of the day, be like his successors, because we have this trajectory now in the EFCC that at the end of every administration, every chairman seems to have a problem.
They seem to live in a very controversial manner, and we hope he's not going to fall into that trap. I was listening to him yesterday. One of the things he talked about was the issue of contract fraud, what you were trying to talk about. You know, he identified one of those things as one of the critical things, you know, that commission needs to work on. You have a situation where people get contracts, you know, the money is being awarded, but they don't execute the contracts. And when it comes to even the process of documentation, you can't have the necessary figures and statistics to back up such kind of contracts. And like he said, there's a need for that commission to sit up to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yes, the controversy notwithstanding that Olukoyede is a lawyer and not a security expert, or has not been in any security force in Nigeria. Well, like I said, when that issue was first brought up, that there are reasons why, I believe that there are reasons why the president chose to set aside the EFCC Act and appoint someone who's a lawyer when the Act states otherwise.
No. I don't think the Act was set aside. You see, people are giving varied interpretations to that particular section of the Act. And I think what is important is that we must realize, you see, when we come to issues like this, you have opposition on one side and you have the government on the other side. The opposition has taken one side to look at the issue. And this issue, of course, I was listening to Bani the other day, and Boala talk about the same issues, and they have different contrary positions on the issues. What the Act says is that the person must have been in the law enforcement. Now, to be in the law enforcement doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be a hardcore law enforcement officer. So you can be in police. There are a lot of people who are in the police force who are not policemen, but they are civilians working in the police. So if you take the literal interpretation of that law, the man, having served as chief of staff in that enforcement agency and rose to become the secretary of that agency, it will be very difficult for you to say that the Act was set aside. No, because the Senate who approved the rule would have been able to point it out, because the person is the lawmaker who writes the law that can tell you what they had in mind while they were writing the law.
Okay, but what I was about to say is that it is assumed, or it is looked at to be set aside, because what you just said, those are like technical interpretations. When you look at it in the context of this, in the context of that, they're kind of contextual and not just
No, it's what is written.
Yes.
What is written on the Act?
The general interpretation
now this is
of
what,
it.
yes, you are putting interpretation. Lawyer put interpretation. You see, this is where people could go. Just go to the court and then you will sort it out. Because anything that is written in law that has no ambiguity in it, what's the ambiguity? Now, if you say it must be a serving policeman, for example, it will be very clear that the law says is a serving policeman, and now you are appointing somebody who is not a serving policeman. The law says he must have worked in the law enforcement. EFCC is a law enforcement agency. So if the man has worked in EFCC, first as chief of staff to the chairman, and then second as secretary to the commission, which is the second most ranking person, Senate cleared him to become secretary. The current secretary of EFCC is also a civilian, but he has been in the system for over 20 years. So you can't say this person has no cognate experience because he was not a policeman. That's what I'm saying. So there's no place it was written that this person must be a policeman or he must be a soldier or military person. So the law simply says he would have served in the law enforcement agency. And then, of course, the other aspect that was argued was the fact that he has a cognate experience. For now, when you talk about cognate experience, it means that you actually have experience within that domain. Now, look at where the man has worked all his life. He has worked as compliance officer in all the companies where he worked. He has studied fraud. He has worked in fraud detection departments. So you can't say he doesn't have cognate experience to deal with these issues. That's the point I'm making.
But my point My point is this: that regardless of the controversy around it, I think a lawyer is the best person to catch you when you've committed crime, because there may be some things that the ordinary person may overlook. Maybe the law enforcement officer, so to speak, which in this case it's been broadened now to not just being a policeman, may be looking at physical evidence, but the lawyer looks at documentation. What had gone wrong? What did you not comply with? Looks at the rules, look at the laws and every other thing. So I believe those were the considerations of Mr. President and the considerations as well of the House to say this is who we need. Someone who knows the law, someone who knows what it takes to break the law and what it takes to actually enforce the law, to head a commission like that. So I think we should just expect him to walk the talk and let the controversy or whatever other feelings to die.
And interestingly, let me inform you, a group of persons have approached the courts, to make interpretation of this, and let's see how it goes, because the argument is here or there. But now that you have a court case, now let's see how it goes. And then for me, my advice to the new EFCC chairman is to ensure that he's focused, irrespective of the distractions and the controversy. All right, let's move on. Now to education, the federal government has unveiled a centralized hub for tertiary education services designed to bring educators, students, and academic community together. Now, there's a new information technology-based platform now that the federal government has unveiled, and the platform is to, rekindle the hope of tertiary education system, and is to reposition, strengthen, and bring all the stakeholders together. When you talk about educators, students, and academic, like an e-community for tertiary institutions in Nigeria. We've been talking about the issue of technology, deploying technology to education services. Idauza, what's your take on this?
Well, I don't know what to say here. Yeah, but I think these are really long overdue, where we really don't need the Ministry of Education to begin to tell the universities what to do, when especially they are the ones who are playing dominantly in that terrain. And I think one of the reasons given by the minister was the fact that during the lockdown, during the COVID period, a lot of the public institutions were really not able to go online to go to do their academics, and some people lost full year, some people 2 years, and some universities as we speak have not been able to recover their academic calendar. This is because they also refuse to actually deploy technology to do some of all these things. And I don't think these are big issues that really we need to celebrate. We should be putting our heart in very hardcore issues that also affect our education. Still on the PAC meeting on Monday, one of the issues I also raised with them is the fact that as a nation where we are now, especially looking at our very high debt profile, and also looking at the fact that we are in a serious war, really economic war between the most civilized and advanced economies of the world, emphasis need really to be on hardcore research and development in our institutions of learning. And this is the only way we can catch up. Now, if we keep looking at issues that are flimsy like this, I don't think this is what we really need to do. The Minister of Education needs to sit down and really interrogate the curriculum of our institutions. And this, for me, is what is critical. We have an educational institution that does not favor research. It's not just to give paper certificate to people so that people go to university and then they graduate 4 years. And after 4 years, what can they do really? Nothing. This is not what we will need to do to get us out of the trouble. Everybody really, as we speak now, understand that our institutions, our tertiary institutions, they need to up their game. We need to get to that point where we are beginning to produce geniuses from our children who will pioneer inventions. Then we will have goods that we can take to the international community or market to sell. This, for me, is where the issues lies, and this is where the emphasis should be. Anybody can produce an app. Private universities have done that. And while this were on and they were running, there was no news on the internet about somebody producing an app. So we should look at the real core things, and this, for me, is how do we redesign our curriculum such that when we train an engineer, an electronics engineer, he should be able to build an electronic application. When you train a civil engineer, he should be able to build a house. Or a mechanical engineer who is able to actually build a car. And this is where the conversation should center around. So that at the end of the day, we are really not just pushing people out of school and pushing them out, but we are really pushing people who, when they finish schools, they can fit into the workplace and then deliver value, as it were.
There are other services that will be available on this platform that has just been launched, includes sponsored mobile internet access, Ego scan for plagiarism. Now that caught my attention because we see a lot of plagiarized work in the educational system, from textbooks, from books that are supposed to guide students on different courses, supposedly written by maybe lecturers. A lot of them are plagiarized, or some of them are plagiarized, and it's like a thing of lifting. You go to another book, you're seeing almost the exact words that you found on one particular textbook being written, but it's bearing the name of another person. Even for project works, it has also made students lazy that they can just copy project works of former students and then put their names on it, assignments, a lot of things. So it doesn't encourage ingenuity. It doesn't encourage people to be studious. It doesn't even encourage research, because why would you want to stress yourself to do all of that? People are doing project work and they're not even bothering to even give out questionnaires and do the sample well and to make sure that everything is written by them, because you can just copy everything, change the name and change a few things. But with this, I believe it will encourage people to pay attention to their work, write well. If you're writing the book, then you should be the author of the book and not be the one just doing lifting and selling to students to buy.
Yeah, but I think it's actually put it right. There's no real original work, because every work you see is actually somebody else's work. And I think the issue here is the fact that institutions need to also teach research method very well, so that especially when people do literature review, they know what to do with the literature. And I think that's where the missing link really is, because the referencing style of this institution will determine whether people they don't say you shouldn't copy somebody. What the system is saying is that if you copy somebody's work, you should be able to reference that person and acknowledge his originality, that this is not your work. Because in research, it's actually that you are agreeing with somebody or you're disagreeing with what somebody has said. And I think this is also very fundamental, because the emphasis which we pay to research in the university system today, I don't know if it has changed. You see, people start to do research method maybe close to your graduation. And it's just maybe 4 unit course you do. in one semester, then the next semester you are expected to write a research work. That won't work. People need to be taken through the process of research. What does it mean to do a review of literature? People should be given that privilege to review literatures. And then somebody will be able to tell them, this is not how to review literature. This is what is missing in our academic space. Because students really don't know what to do. So they cut here and paste. And of course, the students will become lecturers too now. So if you have not gone to University of Oxford or gone to Harvard, then of course it's what you know you will of course put into practice.
Cut and paste.
Yeah, so this is the real issue, and this is where for me really we really need to review and interrogate our curriculum, so that when we are teaching people, then we tell them how to go about research, whether it's in the social science or whether it's even in the hardcore science, and people will know what to do at every point.
I strongly feel having an online platform for lecturing, it's long overdue.
Yes.
With the experience we had when we had the outbreak of COVID, has taught us that lessons, and I think it's necessary to have this kind of digital learning platform. So I'm happy it's coming on board. All right, let's move on to the next story, which has to do with the Nigerian Communication Commission, NCC, the plan on the way to provide affordable and reliable broadband services accessible to all Nigerians. The emphasis is affordable and reliable broadband services. Should we be excited?
Well, until you tell us what the affordable means, the excitement may not be there.
You want to know exactly in naira and kobo.
So they should give us a figure. So we know what we have that.
Looking at the cost of
then we will be
data
able to access it and then
access to internet.
Oh yeah, because internet is expensive. It's expensive, and it's not just here alone. They also need to, you see, these are issues for me, and I raised these issues very deeply on Monday at that meeting. You see, because we have a trust deficit in government, and I don't think that this is the era of government making too much of promises to people. We should tell people the way things are, so that when, of course, at the point of delivery, people will be able to assess you. This, for me, is important. It's not just to tell citizens, we are going to make life better for you. No. It's not as simple as that. Not as simple. And so people you raise their hope unnecessarily. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, they are expecting the manifestation of the promise made. And then, of course, we are not able to fulfill it. So I think that, yes, you have an intention. Let this thing blossom before we rush to the press with promises. The more of this we do, the more credibility the government loses. And the more the credibility government loses, the more, of course, you see that you are losing control of your citizens. And for me, what is important for this particular regime and government is to build trust. And how do you do this? Is by saying what you mean and meaning what you say.
What should be the impact of ethnic diversion and inclusion? Should it be, like I said from my intro, should it be a blessing or otherwise?
Well, it can be a blessing. It can also be a curse, and that is absolutely dependent on how people are able to manage diversity. Really, when we look at creation, for example, we see a whole lot that what really make it worthwhile or beautiful is diversity. But somehow we find that in terms of managing this diversity, a whole lot of things can actually go wrong. And this is when some people feel insecure in the midst of people who are of different ethnic extraction. These are issues, of course, that you have to deal with in workplace, and that's where leadership really is required. When you have the appropriate leadership, of course, they could be really a blessing.
So what are some of the issues that can come up from having a diverse ethnic workplace?
Well, you see, people tend to always aggravate around people they are secure with. And the whole real issue is security. So if I'm from a certain ethnic tribe and I find my people, the chances are that I am going to feel more secure about this person than somebody who is from a different tribe. And now, if this becomes a trend or a tradition or a culture in an organization, you will see people start to add in silos or groups that will be working at cross purposes against the organizational goal. That's why I say, because a whole lot of people come to workplace with so many stereotypes, some biases that are really lying in the subconscious or the unconscious of every individual, and these are based on the stories that you have heard from people of other people, and so you have prepared your mind coming to workplaces that there are some people that have been stereotyped in a certain way, and you are thinking they are going to act in that particular fashion. So when people have these biases and this stereotyping in their DNA, it is difficult really for them to work with people from other tribes. So this is the real issue. But once people become real universal and they have disabused their mind of any biases, understanding that every ethnic group has its good, has its bad, and has its ugly. And then, of course, you can be much more open and broad in terms of dealing with people.
All right, let's look at Nigeria as a country. Nigeria has a population of over 200 million and ethnicity more than 300. How do we take advantage of our diversity to ensure that it's being tailored towards growth and development? And what are the challenges, when it comes to having inclusion as far as Nigeria is concerned? What are the cropping issues?
Well, speaking to ethnic politics and management, a whole lot has been written in that regard, especially by many political scientists on managing our diversity, and because it has been very crucial to where we find ourselves as of today, really. Yeah, but one of the most outstanding author in that regard is Professor Kudeba Onoli, who wrote a book on ethnic politics in Nigeria. And one of the issues that was raised in that thesis was the fact that over the period of our negotiation for independence, that you have a lot of people who, of course, will be clouded by ethnicity and really were not looking at the issue that was on the table. And what was that issue? That we're all collectively, whether from the north or the south, every one of us were slaves to the colonial masters, and that was what was important for us to actually rally around and bury our secondary contradictions in such a way that we can overcome colonial rule and then become one body. But unfortunately, in the process of working toward that goal, we find ourselves having a recourse to our ethnic background. And of course, that has actually been the bane of the Nigerian Federation. So when Claude Ake was writing of blessed memory, said Nigeria really had not been able to put development on its front burner. Now, what has been on the front burner is our politics. Of course, because like they say, politics is who gets what, when, and how. Now, if the man who is at the center, who determines who gets what, when, and how, factor in these sentiments into the way results are shown, chances are that you are going to have people mistrust leadership. And this is what we have seen in the last 60 years of our independence. Now, for example, I was sharing with some people an exercise we call the piece of cake, where we ask, okay, take about 11 a 4-straight line, cut through a piece of cake and ensure that 11 people get a share. And every time people try that exercise, they always arrive at 8 pieces. And I ask, what's left for the other 3 people? People get stuck. And this is where really the challenge is. When you are sharing resources, and of course you are not accommodating everybody, suspicion will be there. Yesterday, I was speaking to somebody and I said, one of the issues, for example, you talk about when you hear people are talking about padding of our budgets in the legislature, one of the things that come to mind, and people, because when you use the word padding, it's negative connotations. People see it as, oh, these people are trying to load the budget so that they can cheat. But that's really not the issue. Now, listening to lawmakers speak, and most of the time they say, I come from a local government. 10 years, my local government doesn't feature on the federal budget. And yet I'm representing them. Because as a legislator, I have 3 basic roles. The first role is representation. So if I'm representing my people in a government, and for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, the name of my local government does not feature in the allocation of resources, how do I tell them I'm representing them? So this is a challenge. And this is because we are not strategic in the way we apply resources, such that we are able to program it to say in 8 years or in 12 years, all the 12 or the 774 local government, for example, in Nigeria, will be covered by something. And this is where the real challenge lies. Now, when you see other examples where ethnic nationality has been managed, especially in Singapore, with 3 major ethnic groups, what Lee Kuan Yew did, though he was a Chinese, he associated more with the Malays. He even had to send his children to Malay school to go and learn the Malay language. And that reduces the mistrust in the system. So when you, as a leader in an organization, and you sit around people, and then, of course, you're speaking your language, where other languages or people who don't even understand the language are there, you make them feel insecure. What this means is that we are not wanted here. And so if I'm not wanted, why will I need to volunteer or contribute my quota to the success of this business? This is issues, and this is why I speak to it, that leadership is critical in terms of managing diversity.
So what are some of the strategic ways that an organization can combat bias and stereotypes and some practices that may make other ethnic groups feel insecure within the workplace?
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. That's why I said everything, like they say, rises and falls on leadership. And once leaders are able to emphasize that I really don't care where you come from, what is important to us is our goal or the core purpose why we are here. And once the why is defined according to Simon Sinek, which is the just cause for which an organization is set up, then of course that becomes the driving force. So it really don't matter who run the business. All that we are interested in is how to get the problem solved. So the person who can do or solve the problem becomes really the brother or sisters. I think that is very clear in scripture. When people came and said to Jesus, and they asked him, and he said, Master, your mother and your father, they've been looking for you past 3 days. And he said, who are my father? Who are my mother? So the one that are sitting down listening to me, they are my father, they are my mother. And I think that is the kind of leadership that you require in workplace, that is not looking at color, is not looking at race or language, or looking at, of course, people's status. All that he looks at is who can actually deliver results. And of course, where excellence is rewarded, then of course you will be able to overcome these pedestrian or trivialities.
But that may be very easy to accomplish in a private sector. But in the public service and in some other areas, particularly in Nigeria, you find a situation where the person who rises to the head of leadership in that particular organization or parastatal must come from the dominant ethnic group in that area. And these practices keep on going. It now seems like the normal thing to do. How can such be corrected?
Well, I think, for example, yes, you said in the private sector it's important because what drives is the motive is profit. So if I am concerned about getting profit, all that I would be interested in is who can contribute to make that profit possible. Now, but in the public sector, in short, I was speaking on Monday again, I keep referring to this meeting with these legislators, and one of the issues I raised with them, and I said, look, this government must run like a business. We must put sentiments aside. What confronts us, for example, is the fact that we're looking at a nation, and when we take the statistics, for example, as we are looking at it today, it's gray. It's not painting, it's gloomy in outlook. That we're looking at in 5 years' time, Nigeria will be about 260 million, being among the first 8 most populous nations in the world. And by 2050, we are getting up to over 400 million people if we move at the same rate. Now, what is facing us is not whether we are from the north or from the east. The problem that confronts us today, issues that dollar is selling at 1,048, it does not have any ethnic sympathy. There's no food in the nation, there's no ethnic sympathy. And this is the issues that we have found, that where human beings are not strong enough to manage issues. Take, for example, in the management of our diversity, we have come up with what they call the federal character system, the quota system. And what is this supposed to do? It's supposed to see how do we really ensure that there is inclusion in terms of taking or assessing what belongs to the Commonwealth, such that no state is left out, such that no geopolitical entity is left out. But in the last years, we have misapplied the quota system. Quota is not synonymous with mediocrity. What it presupposes is that it should actually give room for people of different ethnic nationality and diversity to come together and be in the same workplace and environment. And that, of course, will increase the bondedness of this ethnic nationality. But what do you see today, for example? Even in terms of filling position in the unity schools, for example, you see somebody, they say, oh, he's from educationally disadvantaged state. Now, if I am from educationally advantaged state like Lagos and I have a score of 160 over 200, I am denied admission. And then another child who is coming from Adamawa scored 28 and is given admission in the name of quota. What you do is you create distrust. And this is why people don't feel belong to the entity called Nigeria. And this is also the real reason why people are not patriotic to the cause of the nation, because they are feeling shortchanged. Now, I've argued this severally. Those who so-called educationally disadvantaged state, what make it educationally disadvantaged? Is it that the teachers are not qualified? Do they need to recruit teachers who, for example, should prepare the children so that they can read that baseline? This is what we need to do. Now, if the teachers are not enough, then reduce the number of schools so that you can have good qualified teachers to prepare the children so that they can be competitive. We are even living in a world now that are without borders. That competition is not just within your nationality. Competition now is global, because your nation can no longer provide everything that you need. So you have to compete with people from China, people from Indonesia. Now, how do you use those low grade to compete? This is the challenge that all of us must embrace as leaders, that look, yes, while we are working toward inclusion, which of course is also very, very critical in terms of the sustainability debate, especially the people part of the sustainable agenda, that people, even people with disabilities, of course, we must find a way to include them within the system. And that requires a lot on the companies or establishment to put in place. Take, for example, the walkways. When you're doing your building, you put into account that it's not only just people with 2 legs that can climb here. There are also people who can walk, and you must make that space for them to climb. Now, you are building your toilet, you must make allowances for these sets of people. Now, all these ideas about inclusion, especially the sustainability debate, is to see that everybody feel equal in the workplace. And this is what the challenge is, and this is what is before us as a people. That is really not about where we come from. I argue somewhere, somebody said to me, oh, it's our turn to produce president. And I said, South produced a president for 6 years. I really didn't have any single benefit. No road to my village, no lights, no industry. So what benefit is it to me that somebody from South is a president, or somebody from Southwest is president? Tinubu is president today from Southwest. I'm not sure that every Southwest that's actually benefited. It's actually an individual. And I think we must get to that point in our own understanding and conversation, that the fact that somebody comes from your ethnic group become a president really does not translate into good life for you. What is important is that we find somebody who is broad-hearted and who is driven by passion for the good of the majority of the people. And I think this is what should really form the basis for the consideration of who we choose to lead us as a people.
You're almost answering my question, because I actually want us to look at the political terrain. You have this practice in this climb when it comes to politicking. People bring the ethnic sentiment, the prejudice, they spice it up when it comes to politicking. Why do you think it's so? And then how can we change the narrative to ensure that we begin to take advantage of our diversity and ensure there's proper inclusion?
You see, it's just that sometimes people don't study trend. And this is really why, for me, somehow you look at some certain things, you be wondering why people will reach some certain conclusion. As long as power had remained in the north, the economic base come to the south. It's almost natural. Because while you are struggling to prove that you are not biased, you will be conceding ground to the other side that does not produce leadership. That's happened from time to time. Because every little intention that you make, somebody is going to interpret it. And so you will be doing and working hard, because it's just a given. Because you know naturally in the political circle, your people are going to vote for you. So you take that for granted. So where do you need to do more work? You need to do more work where you feel people are suspicious. And in order to do more work there, you will be pacifying them. It's just natural. You will be pacifying them. So if me were left alone, I would have just liked to remain in opposition so that they continue to pacify me. When you do something, I will just read the meaning and motives to it and say, oh, we're trying, because you need to come and win my place, for example. But unfortunately, we don't think this way. And this is because the politicians have read our psychology. And they know that we are not deep in terms of critical analysis. And therefore, they play on our emotions and they play on our sentiment. And I think, again, like I always say, the bedrock of any nation is a good educational system where people are trained to think critically and be able to weigh alternatives and see which benefit them the most. Because, like I said, we don't take ethnicity to the market. We don't take it to the supermarket. And, of course, it's not a ticket to jackpot even. So what's important for us is good life. And where it comes from really shouldn't really be a problem for us.
As much as an organization wants to ensure ethnic diversity and inclusion in the workplace, what are the metrics by which it can measure its success in that aspect?
Well, of course, the world is setting certain metrics today. Take, for example, talking inclusion, for example, people are saying, of course, there's a certain percentage of women you want to have in the place you work. Some people are also having to say, okay, disabled are to be included. Young people also must be included. All these things are being set by the global bodies to ensure that we carry a lot of people along. So these are the real things that we talk. But then, of course, in the workplace, you must also put into consideration, and this is where, of course, I speak about stereotypes and some biases. And people are looking, take for example, the balance between male and female, that you are finding that there are some certain things that you think women will not be able to achieve, and it will be easier for men to do it, maybe because of what is required, the energy or the strength that's required to do that job, the stamina to be able to stay on, depending on what nature of a job is. So people pull all these things into consideration, because at the end of the day, is the output that is actually determining what kind of persons that you want to recruit. So it's not just that you are recruiting people for recruiting sake, just to make sure that you set a balance, and at the end of the day, you are really not meeting the target or the output that you have set out to meet ab initio. So for me, really, the metric should just be qualification. That if this person is right to do the job, and if he has proven in the time past that he has been able to accomplish something that's similar, or that he has the potential to be able to do the job, there should be no discrimination on the basis of whether gender, whether race, or even social class.
Let's talk about some of the mechanism an employer needs to put in place to ensure, ethnicity, taking advantage of the diversity and inclusion in the workplace, whereby you're promoting unity. What kind of mechanism will be put in place to ensure that you encourage people to shy away from ethnicity, biases, and all form of prejudice?
Yeah, like I said, I've really alluded to that, and I have told you what Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore to be able to douse the tension of mistrust within society, and I think that's what every leader needs to learn. That people want to gravitate to places where they feel secured. They are not threatened because of where they come from or the color of their skin. And so in the workplace, you find that a lot of people really take job not because of the salary most of the time. Yes, it's important, the salary, but the sense of security and trust that they feel within the system is also very important. And this is why you see some people can remain in a job even though they have a better offer somewhere, but they see that, look, the kind of community I found around myself here is just conducive. Because you also have seen people who have left a place and then they went for a better offer and then start to regret, because what you find in that space really is not, you are not finding fulfillment in what you do because of the way the place is organized. And this is why a lot of people say in terms of branding, that no matter what strategy you put in place, culture will eat up strategy as a breakfast any day, any time. So if you have a strong culture, people culture, where you treat everybody equally, and you are dispassionate in terms of relating with people, and you are not selective in terms of applications of rules, people know that if you merit punishment, you are punished. If you merit reward, you are rewarded, irrespective of your closeness to the CEO, for example. Then, of course, you can actually forge some sense of unity.
Now, in forging the sense of unity, leadership has done its own by ensuring that those who are qualified get the roles or get the position. But how do you see affinity groups that focus on particular ethnic groups? You find that happening in schools, tertiary institutions, for instance, where you have different ethnic groups, and they also have like a culture week where the different ethnic groups showcase their culture. But in the workplace environment, things like that may begin to happen amongst employees who find that they are from the same ethnic group, and then they begin to form an alliance, making other employees uncomfortable. In a situation like that, because it is seen in this part of the world that you can't stop people from speaking their language. You can't stop people from identifying with someone from their ethnic group. How can the leadership step in to ensure it doesn't become a kind of toxic culture that makes other persons uncomfortable?
Well, in the school, that's understandable. Sometimes you just also want to showcase the beauty of color and see how diversity really add beauty to what we do. That's understandable. But for me, work is work. When you come to work, I don't think you come to work to come and do socials. If you can do that during break. When people are in the office, they should do the office work. Except that there's a work that is bringing people together. I don't see why people should really be gravitating around cultural issues in the office. It doesn't make anything good. People should come to work, and when you are coming to work, like in other climes, people make you come to work, and what you're doing, you're on your table and you are doing your work. It really doesn't matter. Like somebody said, you can get anything done as long as you don't really care who takes the blame or who takes the praise. So, you go to the UAE, for example, where you have about 10 million people in total, and the locals, they are just about 1.5 million. Now, this for me is a challenge to the conversation which we foster here. What they call today, we call it in this part local content. That if I set up an organization, I must have a certain degree of locals who will work with me. Now, for me, this is a kind of an inhibitor to progress. Because what that means, it puts you in a tight corner where you have to look for people because you must include them in your business, and therefore, these persons have to be taken, whether they are qualified or not. Now, before in the UAE, they say, oh, you must have an indigene who is part and parcel of that business. Today, they have removed that law. Because they know that the indigenes may not be qualified. So if you have somebody who is qualified, yeah, but what have they done in place of that is that they made a room that if you're registering a company, you have a sponsor who is an indigene. And you're allowed to recruit whoever works with you, as long as they are productive and they are generating results. Now, what you see is that from the 1977, the nationalization policy of Obasanjo then, up to today, you see, as a nation, we pay blind eye to fundamental issues. We started to go down from the nationalization policy. Because by the time you remove the experts and you ask the locals to do the work, they couldn't do it. And it is that tragedy of fall that we are in till today. Go and check it, and history will show you how we have been nosediving from that policy. Just because that somebody feel, oh, as a military man, you needed to fight colonial master because they took some actions and you need to fight back, and you take all the companies and say you want to run it yourself. But you don't have the capacity to run it. That's why all our critical national assets, they are all dead as we speak. So for me, really, I think what should be emphasized, whether it's in a workplace or at the nation center, should be excellence, competence. So when people base recruitment parameters on excellence, intelligence, whether it is IQ, whether it's emotional intelligence, whether it's social intelligence, whether it is adversity intelligence, just base it on intelligences and competencies. That somebody is going to do this work, he can do it. And if there is somebody who can do it better, we should not substitute mediocrity for meritocracy. But you see, what has been our bane is that we have sacrificed meritocracy on the altar of mediocrity in the name of ethnic nationalities.
All right, as we wrap up, let's look at the issue of marginalization, where people feel marginalized, some minority group, you know, even the major ones, they feel like that. And this is why, or what is fueling the call for restructuring in recent times, where they feel their interests are not being protected. How do we handle this as a nation? And then what could be the way forward?
Well, I think marginalization has become a mantra of a sort in our country, where you see people are crying that they are marginalized. Now, when you look at the way we deal with marginalization, sometimes again, it's ludicrous. Take, for example, in the assignment of portfolio ministries, I hear people talk about Jewisy ministries. Why should a ministry be Jewisy? For example, that all the Jewisy ministry is given to one ethnic group. Why is a ministry Jewisy in the first place? Because these are all incentive for corruption. And this is the real problem. That what people call marginalization is that they don't have opportunity to steal. This is the real issue. Yeah, but you see, because when you look at all the conversation we are having, and people are saying, oh, I would have had a better opportunity to steal here than where you are putting me here because money does not come here. That's the conversation we're having. And this is the real thing creating the fertile ground for corruption. Otherwise, every ministry is the same. What are you supposed to do is to excel or bloom where you are positioned. This has been the real issue. So there's nothing like marginalization if you say. Now, because even in the family, there are marginalization. As a father, I have sons, and I want to give an assignment. I should also think we should do it better. It doesn't matter how the other person will feel. Now, if I know that my younger son will do it better than the first one, and I go and give it to the one who will not do it well, and then he wastes it, what value would that add to me? This is the real issue, that we need to train ourselves up, and we need to think, critically about issues and weigh the options. What are the benefits that is coming? That should be the driving force. What's the goal? Now, who really cares? Who rules? If there's food in abundance, if people know that when they compete for a position, that nobody is going to give them preference because they have one big brother who is somewhere, then everybody will sit tight, everybody will work hard. Now, but because there's so much attraction at the center, there's so much to steal from the center. This is why the cry of marginalization is hitting the roofs.